Hello everyone and good morning. This is Rachel live from Kalkine Studios and you're watching The Opening Bell. While the commodity supercycle and key economic data are closely eyed by market participants, Australia's upcoming federal budget is also set to drive the market mood. Stay tuned with me as I share some of the important aspects of the measures expected in the nation's federal budget. The ASX 200 is taking over today. Thank you. The ASX 200 is trading lower today, dropping 0.6% to 7,131 during the early trade hours after setting a new 52-week high. IT, telecom and energy sectors are pulling down the chords. The bottom performing stocks in this index are Redbubble and the A2 Milk Company. New Zealand's A2 Milk skids for second day after an outlook cut. The company on Monday cut its annual sales forecast for the third time amid disruptions in the Daigou channel and excess inventory, and said it would review its strategy with China. The tech sector is pulling down the benchmark index following weak tech sector performance overnight. On Monday, the ASX 200 charged up with full force to mark its new 52-week high. The benchmark index closed the session up by 1.3%, near the high of the day at 7,172.8. Looking at sectoral chart, energy shares may do well today. Crude oil prices fell slightly and closed in negative territory. WTI crude oil price fell 0.15% to $64.80 per barrel, while Brent crude was down 0.15% to $68.19 a barrel. Iron ore players are set to witness another victorious day on the board on the back of surging iron ore prices. Today is an important day for Australia as Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is set to deliver a much-needed big spending 2021 to 2022 budget to continue paving the way to economic recovery from the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. There's more spending on property, infrastructure, technology, mental health, aged care, childcare, women and disability, as well as tax offsets for lower and middle income class are expected to be announced. Let us now take a look at the US market performance over the night. That's closely tracked across global market participants. Wall Street closed higher on Monday as inflation worries instilled fear among investors, driving them away from market-leading growth stocks towards cyclicals, which are poised to benefit most as the economy reopens. The Dow Jones fell 0.1% to 34,742.82, while the S&P 500 is 1.04% to 4,188.43. The NASDAQ lost a hefty 2.55% to 13,401.86. Industrials and healthcare shares capped the Dow Jones decline, but the blue chip average reversed course during the late session to snap a three-day streak of record closing highs. The first quarter reporting session was entered in the home stretch with 439 of the companies in the S&P 500 having reported as of Friday. According to Refinitiv Institutional Brokers' estimate system, of those 439 companies, 87% had beaten consensus expectations. A demand resurgence is colliding with weary supply of basic materials, leading to inflation worries. These worries may be calmed once the supply lines are rebuilt, but that's going to take some time. Break-evens on Treasury inflation-protected securities over the coming 5 years, which measure the inflation expectations, surged to a decade high of 2.73%. At the same time, the yield on 10-year US Treasury notes was up 2.3 basis points at 1.602%. Inflation concerns will take centre stage while the US Labour Department releases its latest consumer price index report on Wednesday. The US dollar index tried to recover from the 2-month low made on Friday, making a lower low during the early trading hours, but closed 0.08% up at 90.27. The Australian dollar fell 0.14% to 0.7828. Moving on to the major newsmakers in the Australian market now. Manufacturing, building and construction materials company Boral has asked its shareholders to reject a $6.50 per share takeover from Seven Group Holdings, made off market. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is seeking public consultation on Woolworths' proposed acquisition of 65% of the PFD Food Services. An investment manager company, the Pendle Group, has entered a $190 million fully underwritten institutional placement. Moving on now, an international distributor of medicinal cannabis products, Health House International, has announced a proposed acquisition of Can Pharma GmbH, a privately held company with operations in both Germany and Spain. The next big news is that Pilbara Minerals and Calix have executed a memorandum of understanding for a joint venture project. This is to develop a midstream lithium chemicals refinery. The Catapult Group International, who are engaged in developing and also selling wearable sensors to monitor athletes' sport demands, has announced the appointment of technology executive Param Hedge as its chief technology officer. He's going to be there to help accelerate the scale and the company's solutions and technology platform. Moving on now to the cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin saw a decline of 4.5% to $55,686, making a new 5-day low. Dohjcoin, the much hyped and talked about cryptocurrency these days, crashed at 18.3% to 46.5 US cents. Moving on now, let's look at Australia's federal budget that it will be unveiled later this evening. Some of the measures expected are additional home ownership measures to the 2021 to 2022 budget. The government has announced the expansion of the new home guarantee for a second year, a $20,000 increase to the maximum amount of voluntary contributions that can be released under the First Home Super Saver scheme, and also the establishment of a family home guarantee. A family home guarantee scheme is on the cards to help single parents enter the country's housing market, while the government is likely to guarantee 18% of the home deposit. Next, more than $10 billion in spending on the major infrastructure projects is expected over 10 years to boost jobs and productivity. The spending would include a $2 billion new freight hub in Melbourne. In a media interview, Josh Frydenberg stated that the budget would factor in a return to international travel in 2022, rather than the assumption in the previous year's budget of borders opening in 2021. The budget is also expected to focus on women's healthcare, also aged care and childcare. Increased spending on mental health support for new mothers and on screening for breast and cervical cancer is expected as part of a $354 million women's health package. The Conservative government would also spend more on pre-pregnancy genetic screening and treatment of eating disorders and endometriosis. Health Minister Greg Hunt says on Sunday that Australia also expects to eradicate breast and cervical cancer by 2035. This is due to screening and vaccinations. A total of around 3,500 women died every year from both illnesses. The budget is expected to focus on increasing childcare subsidies and is expected to pledge $1.7 billion to boost female participation into the workforce. The Australian government is expected to spend $18 billion for aged care reform with the bulk of the spending to focus on building a highly trained aged care workforce, as well as incentives for private residential operators to ensure they remain profitable. The government has already flagged spending $2.5 billion on aged care. Moving on now, with the Australian government reportedly dropping plans to fast-track tax cuts for the wealthy. It will instead extend tax cuts for low and middle-income earners for another year, with tax relief for the wealthy due for introduction in 2024. Notably, $565 million is planned for low emissions technology partnerships. Unemployment welfare payments, job seeker, is expected to fall $14.7 billion by 2024 to 2025 from $32 billion forecast in December. A biosecurity package of $371 million is expected to protect agricultural and regional communities. In addition, the government has announced tax cuts of up to $250,000 for brewers and distilleries. Under the plan, from July the 1st, the government will remove all excise tax payable on the first $350,000 worth of alcohol that leaves the producer's warehouse. The Australian budget results are expected to be unveiled today at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's all from me for the moment. Stay tuned for more live updates on Kalkine TV across the economy, markets and sectors. I'm Rachel, signing off.